The satin of her ballet slippers whispered against the scuffed wooden floor, the sound almost too delicate for the silence pressing in around her. Nyla Daniels leaned into the final stretch of her routine, the muscles in her legs burning with the familiar ache of discipline. She had stayed too long again, lost in the music, in the perfection of movement that had always been her escape from a world that felt unyielding. When the final note of the piano track faded, she reached for her bag, only to hear the metallic snap of the lock echo through the building. She froze, her head turned toward the front door, the only exit, now bolted shut from the outside. Panic flickered through her chest. She hurried across the floor, tried the handle, then rattled it hard. Nothing. Whoever had closed the building hadn't checked to see if anyone remained inside. And now she was trapped in a cavernous dance studio, the walls lined with mirrors that reflected her fear back at her. The air shifted. A sound. A scrape near the back window. Nyla's heart slammed against her ribs. She spun around. Someone was moving in the shadows. A tall figure, broad-shouldered, the kind of silhouette that spoke of power, not fragility. For one chilling second, she thought the whispers her mother once told her about men who lingered in alleys were true. "Who's there?" her voice cracked. The figure stepped closer, light from the street lamps catching rough features. Dark hair, eyes glinting amber in the dim glow. His clothes were plain, almost rugged. A man who looked like he had been sleeping rough, like he didn't belong in this world of leotards and point shoes. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice low, steady, dangerous in its calm. "I heard you banging the door." Nyla backed up until her shoulder blades hit the mirror. "If you're here to steal, I own this place." The words landed like a strike. She stared. "You what?" The man tilted his head. The strange light caught his eyes again. Not amber this time, but molten gold. Wolf-like, inhuman. He wasn't lying. He wasn't just breaking in. He was the Alpha. Chapter 2. The Alpha in the Shadows. His name was Kaelen Wolfe, and Nyla realized quickly he was nothing like the vagrants she passed on the subway. His presence filled the room the way storms filled the sky. Heavy, charged, impossible to ignore. "I signed the deed this morning," he said, brushing dust from his jacket. "The studio is mine now. And apparently, so are you. Locked inside." Nyla's lips parted, caught between disbelief and the rising warmth of anger. She folded her arms across her chest, a dancer's proud stance. "If this is your idea of impressing the locals, it's not working." His mouth curved into something between a smirk and a snarl. "You think I'm trying to impress you? You're the one sneaking around after hours." Kaelen stepped closer, and the heat of him struck her before his hand even reached the doorknob. He pulled once, then twice. The lock held firm. His jaw tightened. For a moment, Nyla thought he would rip the door from its hinges with sheer force. Instead, he turned back to her, eyes narrowing. "Looks like we're trapped together." The words twisted something inside her. Alone. With him. In a room that smelled faintly of rosin and lavender chalk. Nyla swallowed. "You expect me to believe you're the owner of this place when you can't even unlock your own door?" The gleam in his eyes deepened, a predator's patience surfacing. "Do you always challenge every man who tries to save you?" She lifted her chin. "Only the ones who look like wolves in disguise." Kaelen didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. Chapter 3. Trapped until dawn. The rain came hard, pelting the long panes like thrown beads. A storm rolled over the city and turned the street outside into a river of glinting black. The studio lights hummed. Somewhere in the lobby, the old radiator ticked like a metronome counting down to morning. Kaelen tested the door again, then the side fire exit, then the backloading bay, all locked from the outside. The new security company, eager to please the new owner, had triggered a full shutter lockdown. Metal teeth gripped every frame. "Congratulations," Nyla said, hugging herself in the chill. "You bought a trap." "Congratulations," he countered dryly. "You stayed past closing without telling anyone and got yourself trapped in it." She shot him a glare in the mirror, then moved to the sound system and restarted the piano track, low, like a heartbeat. Movement calmed her. Every teacher she'd ever had said so. She swept chalk dust from the Rosen box, pressed her toes to the floor, and rolled her ankles to keep the stiffness away. Kaelen watched, arms folded, eyes molten even under fluorescent lights. "You dance like turning your back on the world would be a relief." "You lurk like a man with secrets," she said. "Let's not read each other." Too late. She ignored him and bent to retie her ribbons. The satin was tired. She'd burned through this pair faster than she could afford. A frayed edge caught, and she bit off a quiet curse. He heard it anyway. "There's a first aid kit in the office. Duct tape, too. That the alpha cure for everything?" His mouth twitched. He hadn't told her what he was. Not truly. But the word hit its mark like she'd flung it. He turned away, pretending to study a warped section of Marley where a seam had lifted. "We wait out the night," he said, voice even. "The shutters lift at 6. Morning's a long time from now. Then fill it." He tipped his chin at the floor. "Show me why you're still here after closing." Nyla's laugh was short. "I don't audition for men who think they own the room." "I don't think," he said. "I know." He gestured at the ceiling, the mirrors, the bar, but ownership isn't the same thing as belonging. "I'm still deciding if this place belongs with me. So show me." She wanted to refuse just to spite him, but the storm rattled the windows, the radiator clicked again, and the quiet between them sharpened into something that begged to be cut with music. 2 minutes, she said, and pressed play. She didn't perform. She danced, the way a prayer slips out of someone who's forgotten how to ask. Clean lines, long extensions, a center forged by years of balancing on the edge of other people's expectations. Her skin glowed warm against the studio's cold light. When she leapt, the room felt larger. When she landed, dust lifted like smoke around her feet. When the track ended, she faced him without bowing. Satisfied? Kaelen's throat worked. No. Then, after a beat, more? Buy a ticket. This studio is the ticket. He moved closer, not too close, and the wild scent of rain and pine followed him. Something that didn't belong in a city at all. What's your name? Nyla. Nyla, he repeated, as if testing a key. I'm Kaelen. I gathered. Because you recognized a wolf when you saw one. Because only a wolf would think he can demand and deserve at the same time. Their stares locked, neither blinking first. Somewhere in the building, the exit sign flickered and went out. The storm stole a transformer. The studio fell into a dim blue dusk. All mirrors turned to rivers of shadow. Great, Nyla said. Now we can't even pretend to be civilized. Kaelen's eyes glowed, faint, like embers banked low. Civilized is a coat wolves put on for company. Keep it on, she said. You're in my house. Then dance like you mean to keep it. Chapter 4. Splinters and Terms. They raided the lobby for supplies. 2 paper cups of flat ginger ale from the vending machine, a packet of peanut butter crackers, a box of dusty tissues, and a stack of old brochures, stamped with the studio's former logo. Nyla claimed a corner and made a nest out of warm-up sweaters and her duffel. Kaelen paced the length of the room like a caged thing measuring bars. You're wasting steps, she said. Sprung floors or not. You'll grind your knees. Worried about my joints? Worried about the floor. He huffed a laugh and crouched near the lifted seam in the Marley. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Been saying that all year. Not loud enough. I'm loud, she said. They don't listen. He ran a thumb over the seam and rose, the movement too fluid for a man his size. Who's they? The director, her two favorite swans, their mothers, who just so happen to sit on every board. Anyone who likes their reflection more than the dancers in front of it. Names. Not for you. You think I'll swing a sword? I think men like you buy buildings thinking you're buying history. But you can't purchase devotion. Devotion, he said, rolling the word like a stone in his mouth. That what you call what you do here? She considered. I call it survival. Something softened in his face, then vanished. What were you rehearsing? A contemporary piece for the winter gala, if I even get stage time. You will. You don't know the politics. I know power. He leaned his knuckles on the bar. And I know when it's being misused. I didn't buy this place to watch it rot. She sipped her ginger ale. The carbonation was shy, a ghost of fizz. Why'd you buy it? He looked toward the wall of framed photos, the ones of little girls with missing teeth and boys in too long jazz pants, a collage of recitals and beginnings, because a building isn't just brick. It's whoever walked out of it stronger than they walked in. Poetic, she said. Almost makes me forget you introduced yourself by breaking in through a window. I didn't break anything. I have keys. The shutter jammed. The storm hit. The system panicked. I came to check. I heard you. And thought I was an intruder? And thought you were in trouble. Same thing sometimes. His gaze snagged on her fraying ribbons. Let me see your shoe. No. You're bleeding. She looked down. A crescent of scarlet had bloomed through the satin near her bunion. She hadn't felt it. She'd felt everything else instead. She reached for the first aid kit, and he reached at the same time, their hands colliding over gauze. Heat flashed up her arm like the memory of a burn. Careful, he said, voice low. There are teeth under my skin. Good, she said evenly, taking the gauze. There are knives under mine. Chapter 5. Mirrors and Moonlight. They worked under emergency lights that kept humming and failing, as if the building were breathing shallow in sleep. Kaelen found a toolbox in the office and returned with a tiny roll of gaffer's tape and a flathead screwdriver. Nyla sterilized her blister, winced, taped over ribbon and satin with a precise little patch that would make any shoe tech sigh. You do this a lot, he said. The world rubs, she said. You learn to harden without turning to stone. He watched her relace. There's a difference? Ask any black woman who's had to prove she belongs in rooms built on her back. Silence, respectful and real. Kaelen tucked the screwdriver into his back pocket and glanced toward the skylight. The storm had moved on, leaving the moon to smudge itself along the glass. Pale light slid down the walls, caught on silver specks of rosine, turned the studio to a snow globe someone had shaken and forgotten to set back on the shelf. Dance with me, he said. Nyla blinked. I don't waltz with landlords. Lucky for you, he said. I don't waltz. He lifted one hand, palm open. Just trust me for 8 counts. I don't trust wolves. Then trust the music. She let him take exactly one hand. His grip was warm but disciplined, a soldier's promise not to take what wasn't offered. He didn't lead like a bully. He listened, through skin, through breath, through the faint scrape of her slipper as they shifted. What are you doing? She asked, surprised to hear her voice soften. Finding your rhythm. I know my rhythm. I mean, the one you hide. She snatched her hand back, pulse flicking fast. You think you see through me? I smell the storm on you, the kind that makes you dance like you're outrunning it. He stepped away, giving her space. Again, this time, let the moon set the tempo. She wanted to dismiss him with a laugh. Instead, she moved. An improvisation, sharp, then soft, then something in between. The kind of phrase that feels like writing your name into air so it can't be erased. Kaelen shadowed her without touching. Where she shifted, he pivoted. Where she extended, he made room. She hated that it felt good. She hated even more that it felt true. When she stopped, her chest rose and fell, a quiet tide. Happy? He shook his head. Humbled. Don't make a habit of it. Too late. Chapter 6, the midnight rehearsal. They argued about music. They argued about tempo. They argued about whether an owner had any right to suggest a correction to an arabesque line. Your back is compensating for your ankle, he said. My ankle is fine. You're overcrossing to hide the pronation, she bristled. Oh, now you're a podiatrist? I'm a wolf, he said. Balance is the difference between a clean kill and a broken jaw. Gross. Efficient. She rolled her eyes and tried again. He watched the way a hunter watches wind shear, and she hated him for seeing what she'd been hiding with a smile and grit. When she landed and flinched, tiny but real, he didn't say I told you so. He moved to the storeroom and returned with a battered foam roller and a battered blanket. He set them down without comment, then stretched out on the floor and began to roll his own calves like a student paying penance. You're ridiculous, she muttered. Mirrors don't lie, he said to the ceiling. Humans do. He laughed, a sound that warmed the cold. I'm not exactly human. You keep saying that like I should be impressed. Not impressed, he said, turning his head to look at her. Prepared. Prepared for what? For the way my world touches everything I own. He held her gaze. And I own this place. Not me. Never you. The words were immediate, fierce. Not now. Not ever. Don't confuse my protection for possession. The directness of it unsettled her more than any flirtation could have. She bent to roll out her arch, the slow drag of pressure lighting up nerve endings. You talk like a fairy tale prince who got lost in a wolf's body. He stared up at the moon-splashed ceiling. Or a wolf who learned that ballrooms can be hunting grounds, too. Trust me, she said, thinking of the bored ladies and their polished sons. I've seen worse things in tuxedos than in the forest. Then let's make a new kind of ballroom. He stood. No velvet ropes, no gatekeepers, just steps that belong to anyone who can bear the ache it takes to learn them. You're not serious. I don't waste breath on lies. He nodded toward the corner. Start from the diagonal. I'll spot you on the turns. If you fall, I take the weight. I won't fall. Then I won't save you. She launched into a string of pirouettes, stubborn as a vow. He didn't touch her. He was simply there, the gravity that kept the room from spinning off its axis. When she came down clean, he smiled once, small and real, like a man who just watched a sunrise no one else noticed. Again, he said, bossy, alpha. Same thing, she said, not if you've had the wrong ones. Chapter 7, Paper Crowns. They ate the crackers like contraband and built paper crowns from the old brochures. Nyla's idea, her fingers deft, her laughter a sudden light in the dim. She placed a crooked crown on his head with a flourish. There, she said, Your Majesty. He smirked. You don't bow well. I don't bow at all. He tipped the crown onto her curls, and it stayed. A ridiculous little halo made from a map of class schedules. What about you, Cinderella? She flinched before she could stop it. He saw it. Of course he did. Too close? He asked quietly. My nickname, she said after a moment, was Cinders when I started here. Not sweet, not kind. The director's niece started it. I cleaned to pay for classes. I always smelled like bleach and lavender soap. I mopped more than I danced. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said, lifting her chin. I learned to love the smell of clean floors. There's something holy about making a room ready for joy. He studied her, reverent despite himself. Who kept you off the gala stage? Miss Caro. The director Nyla's mouth flattened. She smiles a lot when donors are watching. The rest of the time, she smiles like she's measuring girls for cages. And her favorites? Two stepsisters in spirit, if not in blood. Perfect turnout, perfect parents, perfect pull with the board. They don't have to be cruel to be dangerous. That's the worst part. Kaelen nodded once, something bright and lethal igniting behind his eyes. Understood. Don't play Prince Charming on my account. I'm not. Princes dance at midnight and vanish. Owners sign checks in daylight and change locks. You really think it's that simple? I think good bones and bad habits are a fixable combination. He lifted her paper crown with 2 fingers and set it truly on her head this time. And I think the girl who mopped studios to pay her way has already done the hardest thing there is to do. What's that? Stay. Chapter 8. The Glass Shoe. The tape held until it didn't. During a lift she absolutely did not agree to do, Nyla slipped. Not a fall, just a misstep that snapped tension along the ribbon. It broke with a whispering pop. Don't, she said, mortified, as the shoe sagged. Kaelen said nothing. He knelt, palm open. She placed the shoe there because pride is no match for pain. He cradled it like a fragile artifact, thumb brushing the dark spot where blood had seeped. He took a pocket knife from the toolbox, trimmed the fray, and retied the ribbon with an efficiency that made her blink. Where'd you learn that? Pack sisters, he said simply. Ribbons, braids, stitches, splints. An alpha who can't dress a wound isn't a leader. He's a liability. He lifted the shoe and set it gently on the floor. She slid her foot back in and exhaled when it hugged her again. As she rose to releve to test it, the knife's handle clicked shut in his hand. He pocketed the torn ribbon end, the little relic of pain, without thinking, and then seemed to realize what he'd done. I'll keep that, he said, voice suddenly rough, so I remember what I owe this place. What you owe me, she corrected, especially you. The heat in the room changed, not hotter, truer. He stepped back like distance was oxygen. She let him, grateful for a breath that didn't taste like lightning. From the top, she said, no lifts. Understood. They worked until sweat purled at her hairline and dampened the collar of his shirt. They worked until the storm smell faded and the studio smelled only like them. Effort, rosin, patience, a slow burn that refused to admit it was fire. Chapter 9. Overtime. At 3 a.m, the city outside had quieted into the kind of silence that isn't empty so much as attentive. Nyla wrapped herself in the blanket he'd found, sat cross-legged by the window, and watched the traffic lights cycle through colors on an empty intersection. Kaelen chose a spot near the door and leaned against it like a sentry, paper crown tilted, eyes half-lidded but awake. You don't sleep? She asked. Not when I'm responsible for something. You said protection isn't possession. It isn't. He shrugged one shoulder. Sometimes it's simply presence. She thought of every night she'd stayed late to mop, alone with the squeak of the bucket's wheels and the echo of her steps. She thought of how no one had ever asked if she was safe going home. A ridiculous, terrible warmth rose in her chest. Why here, Kaelen? She asked softly. Why a dance studio? My mother was a seamstress, he said. She made costumes for a community ballet when I was a boy. I watched shy kids put on wings and become birds. I watched boys who never spoke in school learn to shout with their bodies. I learned what happens when a room makes it possible for someone to become more than their fear. And the wolf? Learn to bow his head when a pot shot crossed his path, he said, a smile ghosting his mouth, and to keep his claws off satin. You're failing at that, she said, eyeing the pocket where he tucked her ribbon. Souvenir, he said. Tithe. Tax, she corrected. You bargain like a queen. Queens clean their own floors. And alphas change their own locks. He glanced at the deadbolt. At sunrise, I'm firing a security company. You can't just fire your way to a better culture. No, he said, but I can remove the first excuse people use when they don't do their jobs. Which is? He looked at her. That no one is watching. They sat in that, the truth of it, the way it folded into rooms and lives and mirrors. Somewhere above, the skylight brightened from pitch to soot to silver. Dawn was walking toward them. Chapter 10. The First Light Test. Last run, Nyla said, standing. If I can do it at 4:30 a.m., I can do it anywhere. Deal, she began, and he did not direct. He bore witness. There are different kinds of saving. Some of them are simply seeing someone exactly as they are without adding or subtracting an inch. She turned and jumped and bled a little and didn't break. When she finished, she was trembling, spent, proud. Kaelen crossed the floor slowly so she could stop him if she wanted. She didn't. He lifted a hand, not to touch, but to hover over the place in the air where her last line had been, as if honoring the ghost of it. You're better than the room you were given, he said. Then give me a different room. I'm building one, he said, eyes steady on hers. Here, you'll make enemies. Good. His mouth tilted, wolf and man in one expression. I'll know I'm hunting the right tradition. Don't use me as a weapon, he shook his head. You're not a weapon. You're the reason you don't need one. The lock clicked, not open. The system simply cycled, motor testing metal. Dawn sharpened another shade, and the emergency light stuttered back to full. The studio returned in pieces. Mirror, bar, scuff, seam, them. 6 o'clock, Kaelen said. When the shutters lift, you go home and sleep. Then you come back at noon, and we put your name on the gala board. You don't pick the program. I do now. She stared at him, at the certainty, at the promise he didn't make but lived. You're infuriating. You're fearless? That's not a compliment. It is, he said, from me. They stood there with the whole future arguing quietly around them, the slow burn beginning to glow at the edges, neither of them feeding it, both of them warmed by it anyway. The storm had passed, the city stretched, the studio held, and for the first time since she'd learned to turn suffering into balance, Nyla believed that when the door unlatched, she wouldn't be stepping back into the same world. She'd be stepping forward. From the top at noon, she said. From the top at noon, he echoed. And Kaelen, yes, bring my ribbon, she said, and didn't look back to see him smile. Chapter 11, Dawn Unlocked. The heavy shutters groaned as they slid upward, letting the pale gold of morning bleed into the studio. The light caught the mirrors and fractured into beams across the floor. Dust motes sparkled like confetti, and Nyla's tired eyes squinted against it. She'd been awake all night, every nerve strung taut from dancing, arguing, and resisting the magnetic pull of the man standing too close. Kaelen tested the door, and this time the handle turned easily. A sliver of the outside world gaped open. The honk of traffic, the smell of wet asphalt, the clatter of footsteps on the sidewalk. Freedom. Nyla hugged her duffel to her chest, relief and disappointment twisting in equal measure. She wanted out. She didn't want to leave. Kaelen stood in the doorway, the storm-slick city behind him, but he didn't step out. He stayed inside, watching her. Go home, Ballerina, She shouldered past him, letting the cool air slap her awake. "Don't order me around." "I don't order," he said, following her onto the sidewalk. "I expect." "Same difference." "No," he said, voice rougher than the morning deserved. "One demands, the other believes." Her steps faltered. She didn't want him to see that his words dug too deep. So she walked faster, ballet shoes swinging from her bag, the frayed ribbon still taped together by his hand. Behind her, Kaelen stayed at the door, watching until she vanished into the rush of commuters. Chapter 12. The Return. By noon, exhaustion clung to her like sweat, but Nyla walked back to the studio anyway. Her body screamed for sleep, but something louder pulled her, something that sounded suspiciously like hope. The door was unlocked this time, propped open with a stone. Inside, the floors had been swept, the vending machine restocked, and a new roll of Marley leaned against the wall. Kaelen was crouched with a toolkit, pulling staples from the old flooring with a patience she hadn't expected from him. "You're fixin' the seam?" she asked, incredulous. "You can't build a new stage on a broken floor," he said without looking up. "That's not your job." He glanced at her. "Whose is it then?" She didn't answer. Instead, she dropped her bag and started stretching, pretending not to notice how his eyes followed her in the mirror. "Don't expect me to thank you," she muttered. "Don't expect me to stop," he replied. They worked in silence for a while, him repairing, her rehearsing. Yet silence with Kaelen was never quiet. It was full, brimming with the words they didn't say, and the arguments waiting to be sparked. When she slipped on a turn, he was there instantly, steadying her elbow. She jerked away. "I don't need saving." "Didn't say you did," he said softly, "but I'll be here when you do." The air tightened, stretched between them like the held note of a violin. Nyla's pulse pounded in her ears, and she hated that the heat rising in her chest felt suspiciously like longing. Chapter 13. The Gala Rehearsal. The studio filled with more dancers as afternoon bled into evening. Girls in pastel leotards giggled at the sight of Kaelen wielding a staple gun, while board members' children whispered about the new owner. Nyla ignored them all, throwing herself into rehearsal until sweat plastered her curls to her forehead. She knew the two favored dancers, Caro's darlings, were watching her from the corner. Their smirks prickled like needles on her skin. "Your port de bras is sloppy," one said as Nyla passed. "She's not gala material," the other chimed in. Nyla's spine went rigid, but before she could retort, Kalen's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Funny," he said, not raising his tone yet commanding the air. "I just saw her turn tighter lines than either of you." The girls froze. Their painted-on confidence faltered. "Mr. Wolfe!" Miss Caro snapped from across the room, arms crossed, smile brittle. "Let's not confuse ownership with expertise." Kalen's golden eyes glinted. "Then let's not confuse favoritism with merit." The room stilled. Dancers stared, wide-eyed. Nyla's cheeks flamed. She wanted to melt into the floor. She wanted to kiss him. She wanted to scream at him for meddling. After rehearsal, she cornered him by the barre. "You just painted a target on my back." "Targets are easier to hit than shadows," he said calmly. "You don't get it." "Caro can end me." "No," he said, stepping closer. "She can't. Not while I'm here." Her throat tightened. "You can't fight all my battles." "I won't," he admitted, "but I'll fight beside you." And for the first time, Nyla didn't argue. She couldn't. Chapter 14. Splinters of Trust. Later that night, when the studio emptied and the echo of point shoes faded, Nyla stayed again. She told herself it was for practice, but deep down she knew it was because he was still there. Kaelen dragged a mop across the floor, sleeves rolled up, shoulders taut with strength that looked better suited for battlefields than janitorial work. She found herself watching him instead of the mirror. "You mop like a soldier," she said, stretching. "Discipline doesn't stop at the door," he answered. "Neither does arrogance. Neither does fire." Their eyes locked, the weight of everything unspoken pressing heavy. For a moment, the slow burn flared brighter, threatening to consume them both. But Nyla turned away first, slipping into another string of pirouettes. "Don't get used to me staying late." "Don't get used to me leaving early," he said. And just like that, the war between them found another night to fight. Chapter 15. The Weight of Silence. The storm of the first night had passed, but tension lingered like humidity that clung long after rain. Nyla stretched at the bar, her back taut, her mind restless. Kaelen leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her with the kind of patience that made her skin prickle. "Do you ever stop staring?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. "Do you ever stop fighting me?" he countered. "Only when I'm asleep." His mouth curved. "Then maybe I should keep watch." Her glare sharpened, though her pulse betrayed her. She wanted to tell him that his presence was too much, too sharp, too steady, too consuming. But the words wouldn't come, so she pushed her body harder instead. Each pirouette was a blade. Each plie was defiance. Kaelen didn't stop her. He didn't correct. He let her burn through the anger until her breath came ragged and her legs trembled. Only then did he move, stepping close enough for his shadow to fold over hers. "You think if you break yourself down enough, no one else can touch you," he murmured. Her throat tightened. "You don't know me." "I know wolves," he said, "and I know warriors. You dance like both." The words cut deeper than any critique. For a moment, she almost hated him for seeing the part of her she tried to bury. Chapter 16. Cracks in the Mirror. The next day, she found him fixing the studio's broken mirrors. Shards had been taped with cheap repairs before, but now Kaelen replaced them with new glass himself. His reflection bent with every tilt, a dozen versions of him staring back. "You don't belong in this place," she told him flatly, standing in the doorway. "Neither do you," he replied without hesitation. The truth of it struck harder than she expected. She was the outsider, the girl who'd mopped floors before she danced on them. And yet, somehow, he was right. She belonged everywhere her body could claim space. When she didn't answer, Kaelen pressed the mirror into place and glanced at her. Sometimes, to belong, you don't wait for permission. You take it. Her lips parted, but no retort came. She hated him more for that. She hated that he made her want to believe. Chapter 17. The Argument That Burned. It was nearly midnight again when the fight erupted. "You think you can swoop in here, buy a studio, and suddenly change everything," Nyla snapped, pacing across the floor. "I don't think," Kaelen said, voice clipped. "I act. That's the difference between dreamers and leaders. You're not a leader here. You're a stranger." "And you?" He stepped closer, his eyes flaring gold. "You're killing yourself for people who will never clap loud enough to notice you." "Why?" "Because it's all I have," the words tore out before she could stop them. The confession echoed off the mirrors, raw and jagged. Silence followed. Kaelen's jaw tightened. He didn't soften. He didn't console. He simply said, "Then stop giving your all to people who don't deserve it." The burn in her chest spread. She wanted to scream, to cry, to fight, but instead she spun into a pirouette so sharp it nearly tore her ankle. She landed hard, breath shuddering, eyes wet. Kaelen was there instantly, not touching, but close enough that his presence steadied her more than any bar. "You're not glass," he said quietly. "Stop acting like you'll shatter." Chapter 18. A Slow Surrender. The next hours passed in quiet reparations. He mopped while she iced her ankle. She drank water while he taped fresh seams along the floor. Their words had burned too hot, but the embers glowed still, softer now. Nyla finally spoke, voice low. I don't like you. Kaelen didn't look up from the mop. Good. Why good? Because if you liked me now, he said, it would be too easy. And you don't do easy. Her laugh cracked despite herself. You're impossible. Alpha, he corrected again, smirk tugging at his mouth. This time, she didn't argue. Chapter 19. The gala approaches. Days bled together. The gala loomed closer, and with it came longer rehearsals, sharper critiques, and whispers that the new owner was upsetting everything. Kaelen didn't care. He prowled the studio like he owned not just the building, but the air within it. And Nyla? Nyla danced harder than she ever had, fueled by spite, survival, and the maddening presence of the man who challenged her at every step. When the board tried to cut her from the program, Kaelen's voice thundered across the meeting, then cancel the gala. The silence that followed was thick. Caro's smile wavered. Nyla's stomach twisted. He had just made her the center of a war she hadn't asked for. Afterward, she stormed into the empty studio where he waited. You're ruining me. I'm saving you, he growled. I didn't ask to be saved. No, he said, stepping close enough that her pulse jumped. But you needed it. Her hand trembled as she shoved him back. I hate you! His golden eyes softened, just barely. Good, he said again, because hate keeps you close enough to argue. And that's closer than silence. Chapter 20. The Fire Between. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stayed in the studio long after the lights should have been cut. Kaelen stayed too, as if bound to her by invisible threads neither wanted to name. They didn't speak. They didn't argue. They simply moved, two storms circling the same sky. At one point, when she stumbled from fatigue, his hand caught hers. She tried to pull away. He didn't let go. For one heartbeat, the world shrank to the space between them. Their breaths, their sweat, their stubborn refusal to admit that the fire burning slow had finally found kindling. Then she ripped her hand free. Don't, she whispered, more plea than command. Not yet, he promised, and the studio swallowed their silence whole. Chapter 21. Fractures in the floor. The studio groaned like it was tired of holding their tension. The floorboards creaked under Kaelen's weight as he paced, each step echoing like a warning. Nyla was at the bar, every muscle rigid, sweat tracing her spine. You push until you break, Kaelen said, voice low but sharp. That's not strength, Ballerina. That's self-destruction. She whipped around, eyes flashing. And what do you know about destruction? You own a deed and a pair of boots. That doesn't make you king of my world. His mouth curved into something too dangerous to be called a smile. No, but it makes me the wolf at your door. Nyla shoved off the bar, crossing the room until only a breath separated them. You think I'm afraid of wolves? You should be, he murmured, golden light flickering in his eyes, because wolves don't ask permission. Her pulse skittered, but she didn't move. Then you'll find out what happens when one bites off more than he can chew. The air between them was lightning, unresolved, sparking, too charged to ignore. He didn't reach for her. She didn't back away. The war smoldered, waiting for the next spark. Chapter 22. Shadows of the Past. The following evening, Caro cornered Nyla in the dressing room. Perfume and powder filled the air, suffocating. You think because Mr. Wolfe favors you, you'll leapfrog over years of tradition? Caro's smile was thin as glass. This company doesn't bend for strays. Nyla's nails dug into her palms. I've bled for this stage more than your favorites ever have. Caro leaned closer, her voice sugar-coated poison. And what happens when he leaves? Men like him always do. You'll be nothing but the girl who cleaned toilets and thought she was a swan. The word struck deep, but Nyla stood taller. She didn't give Caro the satisfaction of a flinch. Later, when Kaelen found her warming up in the dark studio, he saw it anyway, the stiffness in her shoulders, the storm in her eyes. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing you can fix," she said tightly. His jaw flexed, but he let it go. For once, he didn't press. He simply sat on the floor, close enough to be presence, far enough not to corner her. And somehow, that steadiness was worse than fire. It made her want to lean. Chapter 23. Collision. It happened on the third night after Caro's words, when exhaustion blurred the edges of everything. Nyla practiced until her vision swam, until her knees wobbled. Kaelen stopped her mid-turn, hand firm on her wrist. "Enough!" "Don't touch me," she snapped. "Then listen." His voice thundered. "You're tearing yourself apart for people who'd rather see you fail. Stop giving them the pleasure." "I don't need your protection," she shouted, her chest heaving. The silence that followed was jagged. Kaelen's hand fell away, but his gaze pinned her in place. "You're right," he said at last, voice low. "You don't need me." "But I—" He cut off, breath ragged, as if the words burned his tongue. "I can't stop being here." The confession cracked something inside her. She hated him for it. She hated herself more for wanting to believe it. Chapter 24. Glass and Blood. The gala neared, and rehearsals became a battlefield. Nyla's blistered feet left faint spots on the floorboards, roses of pain no one applauded. She taped, she danced, she bled. Kaelen noticed every drop. One night, as she collapsed against the mirror, he crouched in front of her and pressed gauze to her arch. His hands were gentle, too gentle for the wolf she kept accusing him of being. "You're going to scar," he murmured. "Scars are proof I survived." His eyes lifted, gold burning low. "Scars are proof someone hurt you. I'd rather you didn't collect them on my floor." The honesty in his tone was unbearable. She looked away, whispering, "You don't get to care." "Then tell me to stop," he challenged, voice hoarse. She didn't. She couldn't. Chapter 25. The Almost. It was past midnight when they argued again, this time over nothing and everything. She accused him of meddling. He accused her of pride. Words flared, collided, and finally dissolved into silence, when neither had strength left to throw more. They stood inches apart, chests rising, breaths colliding. His gaze dropped once, to her lips, and shot back up. For one dangerous moment, Nyla thought he would kiss her, thought she wanted him to. But Kaelen stepped back, dragging a hand through his hair, muttering something under his breath in a language older than the city itself. The space between them filled with everything they hadn't said, everything they wouldn't admit. "Go home, Ballerina," he said roughly, but Nyla stayed. Chapter 26. Broken Music. The piano in the corner had been silent for weeks, its keys chipped, half the notes sour. At 3 a.m, Nyla sat before it anyway, pressing the cracked ivory until broken chords filled the studio. Kaelen emerged from the shadows, arms folded. "That thing's more ghost than instrument." "Maybe I like ghosts," she murmured. He stepped closer, his reflection joining hers in the mirror above the keys. "You like punishment." She struck a discordant chord, the sound sharp in the stillness. "You would know." He crouched beside her, golden eyes steady. "Don't confuse me with them." Her hands stilled. "And who are you, Kaelen? Owner? Alpha? Savior? Prison guard?" His jaw tightened. The one who doesn't walk away. The words hung between them like an unspoken vow. Nyla's throat burned, but she said nothing. She let the silence be the music instead. Chapter 27. The Invitation. The gala invitation arrived, embossed in silver, Caro's seal stamped cruel and perfect at the top. Nyla found hers shoved to the bottom of a stack, as if it had been an afterthought. When Kaelen saw it, he snatched it from her hands. "They put you on the program," he said, scanning the list. "Barely," she said. "I'm slotted between two showpieces, like a filler act." Kaelen's jaw flexed. "Then we'll make them regret it." "We." Her brow arched. "You think you're alone in this?" His gaze sharpened. "You're not." "Stop talking like you're my partner," she snapped. "Stop dancing like you're alone," he fired back. Their voices echoed off the mirrors, off the memories of nights trapped inside these walls. And beneath it all, the truth throbbed. Neither of them wanted to admit how much they already belonged to this battle, and maybe to each other. Chapter 28. Midnight Practice. The night before the gala, the studio was empty except for them. Moonlight streamed through the skylight, spilling silver across the floor. Nyla rehearsed until her sweat left prints like water stains. Kaelen matched her step for step, not as a dancer, but as a shadow, as a presence. When she faltered, he caught her waist. She shoved him away. "Don't touch me." "Then stop falling," he growled. "Maybe I want to." His eyes burned. "Don't you dare!" Her breath hitched, chest rising and falling with more than exhaustion. "You're infuriating." "You're unstoppable." She hated him for saying it. She hated that she believed him more than she believed herself. Chapter 29. The Eve of Battle. When dawn broke, neither had slept. They sat on opposite sides of the studio, backs against mirrored walls, silence pressing between them. Finally, Nyla spoke. "Why here, Kaelen? Out of every building in this city, why this one?" He lifted his head, eyes molten in the new light. "Because wolves know where the heartbeat of a place lives. And this one beats in you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to push him back into the role of meddling landlord, arrogant alpha, but all she could whisper was, "Don't make me believe in things that break." He leaned forward, voice low and certain. "Then I'll prove I don't." Chapter 30. The Gala. The night was all velvet and jewels, chandeliers casting false stars across the hall. Nyla stood backstage, satin shoes tied, heart pounding like war drums. Caro's darlings preened nearby, their laughter sharp. One of them sneered, "Hope you enjoy your 30 seconds of fame, Cinders." Nyla's hands trembled, but then, beyond the curtain, she caught sight of him. Kaelen in a dark suit, Wolfe's fire barely hidden beneath the polish. His eyes found hers through the crowd, and for one heartbeat, the noise fell away. She stepped onto the stage, the music rose, and she danced. Every step was defiance, every turn was survival, every leap was love and rage, and all the nights spent locked in a studio with a man she swore she hated, but who made her believe she could burn brighter than anyone in that gilded room. When the final note struck, silence hung like a held breath. Then the applause came, thunderous, unwilling to stop. Caro's smile cracked. Kaelen's didn't, and Nyla, trembling and triumphant, bowed, not to them, but to herself. Chapter 31. After the curtain. Backstage was chaos, dancers rushing, board members fawning, the director barking orders through clenched teeth. Nyla slipped into the corner, chest still heaving, sweat cooling against her skin. She wanted to vanish, to hide from the false smiles that surrounded her. But Kaelen found her first. He pushed past stagehands like they weren't even there, his presence commanding the room. His gaze locked onto her, steady, unrelenting. "You burned the stage down," he said, voice low, rough with pride. She shook her head, arms crossed. "Don't exaggerate." "I don't." He stepped closer, tilting his head until her eyes met his. "You didn't dance for them. You danced for yourself. And that's why they'll never forget you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to snap at him for saying too much. But the truth in his voice left her bare. "Don't look at me like that," she whispered. "Like what?" "Like you own this moment." "I don't," he said. "You do." Chapter 32. The Wolf's Shadow. That night, as the gala wound down, Nyla slipped back into the studio alone. She needed silence, space, a place where the applause couldn't follow her. The mirrors greeted her with her own reflection, stronger, prouder, more alive than she'd seen herself before. The door creaked open. She didn't turn. "I knew you'd follow me." Kaelen leaned against the frame, golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "I didn't want you to come back to an empty room." "Maybe I like empty." "You don't," he said simply. Silence stretched between them. Then, softly, she admitted, "I'm afraid." "Of what?" "That when the lights go out, I'll just be the girl who's mopped floors again." Kaelen crossed the room, slow, deliberate. He stopped just shy of touching her, his voice low. "No, you'll always be the fire that made them look twice. Don't let anyone dim that. Not Caro, not me, not even you." Her breath caught, a tremor running through her. He was too close, too much. Yet she didn't move away. Chapter 33. Fractured Truths. The next morning, the studio buzzed with whispers. Some praised her performance. Others muttered that Kaelen's interference had tipped the scales. Nyla ignored them all, but the seed of doubt took root. When Kaelen entered, she turned on him, anger flaring. "Did you pull strings for me?" she demanded. He frowned. "No, don't lie." His eyes narrowed. "If I had, you wouldn't have been slotted between two distractions. That was their attempt to bury you. You burned through it anyway." Her chest rose and fell. "So it was all me? All you," he said firmly. "I'd never steal your fight." The conviction in his voice shook her. She hated how much she wanted to believe him. Chapter 34. The Unwanted Pull. Days passed. They trained, they fought, they argued. Every clash pulled them closer. Every silence left them more entangled. One night, after hours of rehearsal, Nyla collapsed onto the floor, laughing breathlessly. "You're impossible." Kaelen crouched beside her, smirk tugging his mouth. "And you're relentless." She turned her head, meeting his gaze. The air thickened, charged. For a moment, she thought he would lean in. For a moment, she wanted him to. But instead, he stood, offering a hand to pull her up. She ignored it, forcing herself to rise alone. He didn't look hurt, just patient. Too patient. "Someday," he murmured. "Never," she snapped. And yet, her heart betrayed her with its unsteady rhythm. Chapter 35. Moonlit Confession. Another storm rolled through the city. They found themselves locked inside again, shutters rattling like a drumbeat. Nyla sat by the skylight, watching the rain streak down the glass. Kaelen stood nearby, his silhouette cut sharp against the flash of lightning. "I hate storms," she admitted. "I love them," he replied. "Of course you do." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Because storms strip everything down to truth." No masks, no lies, just survival. She swallowed hard. And what's my truth then? That you're more afraid of being seen than of failing, he said softly. Her breath caught. The truth stung, but it was undeniable. And yours? She asked. His eyes glowed faint, golden fire in the dark. That the wolf in me is already yours. The words landed like a strike. She turned away, heart pounding, unable to answer. Chapter 36, The Breaking Point. The storm pressed on into the night, thunder rattling the windows of the studio. Nyla practiced until her body screamed, leaping and landing, turning until the world blurred. Kaelen caught her wrist mid-spin. Enough. Let go. You're bleeding again. She yanked free, glaring at him through strands of damp curls. So what? Pain is the price. His voice dropped, sharp and guttural. No. Pain is a leash, and I won't watch you wear it. Her laugh was bitter. You don't get to decide that. The gold in his eyes flared, raw and untamed. I don't want to decide for you. I want you to decide for yourself that you're worth more than this. Her chest heaved, fury warring with something far more dangerous. Why do you care? Because I can't not, he growled. And just like that, silence crashed harder than any thunder. Chapter 37, The Almost Kiss. Hours later, they sat on opposite ends of the room, exhaustion making the silence heavy. The storm outside softened to drizzle, but inside the tension sharpened with every glance they stole. Finally, Nyla spoke, voice hoarse. You make everything harder. Kaelen shifted closer, each step deliberate, his presence swallowing space. And you make everything worth it. She froze as he crouched in front of her, their faces a breath apart. His hand hovered near her cheek, not touching, but close enough that her skin tingled. Her lips parted, traitorous, ready for something she swore she didn't want. But then she shoved him back, heart hammering. Don't! His jaw tightened, breath ragged. Not yet. Her eyes burned, fury and longing tangled in a knot she couldn't untie. Chapter 38, The Board's Threat. The next morning, the studio filled with clipped voices. Caro and her board allies stood in a cluster, smug in their expensive clothes. This little experiment has gone far enough, Caro announced. Mr. Wolfe, your pet project is a distraction. Either remove her from the program or risk losing our donors. Kaelen's expression was carved from stone. Then lose them. The board gasped. Caro's smile sharpened. You'll regret that. Not as much as you'll regret underestimating her, he said, his voice quiet but lethal. They stormed out, the echo of their heels sharp as a warning. Nyla turned on him the second the door shut. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, Kaelen said simply. I chose you. The words broke her. She wanted to hate him for it. She wanted to love him for it. She could do neither. Chapter 39, Fire and Ice. That night she lashed out. Every move was sharper, harsher, as though she could dance the chaos out of her veins. Kaelen matched her with words that cut. You think you're the only one who's bled for something? You think owning a building makes you the hero? You don't see yourself, he thundered, voice echoing off the mirrors. But I do. And I won't stop until you do too. Her breath caught. Tears stung her eyes. Unwanted, unwelcome. She spun away, collapsing against the bar. I hate you, she whispered. Kaelen stepped behind her, his reflection meeting hers in the mirror. His voice dropped to something softer, something broken. Then hate me close, Nyla. Just don't push me away. Chapter 40. The Turning. Dawn crept through the skylight, painting the floor in pale gold. Neither of them had slept. Nyla sat curled against the bar, Kaelen leaning nearby like a sentinel carved from shadow. Finally, she whispered, "Why me?" His answer was immediate. "Because you're the only one who's ever made me want to be more than alpha. You make me want to be enough." Her breath shuddered out. She turned her face, meeting his molten gaze. For once, she didn't argue. The slow burn had smoldered long enough. Now it glowed, inevitable, waiting for the moment they would finally stop fighting what had always been theirs. Chapter 41. The Cracks Give Way. The storm had left the city clean, washed in new air, but inside the studio the tension was still thick, ripe for breaking. Nyla rehearsed the same phrase again and again, her muscles trembling with fatigue, her breath sharp. Kaelen leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her fall apart piece by piece. Finally, he stepped forward, catching her shoulder before she could launch into another turn. "Stop!" She shook him off. "Don't tell me what to do." "I'm not telling you," he said, voice low, rough. "I'm begging you." Her chest tightened. "Why?" "Because watching you destroy yourself feels like drowning, and I can't breathe without you." The words shattered something in her. She stood frozen, fury and longing colliding in a storm she couldn't dance her way out of. Chapter 42. The Wolf's Truth. Later, when the night swallowed the city whole, Kaelen sat with his back to the mirror, head bowed. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. "You should know what I am," he said into the dim. Nyla, curled on the floor across from him, lifted her chin. "I already do." "No," he said, eyes glowing faintly. "You don't. You think wolf means temper? Alpha means arrogance. But it's more than that. It's hunger. It's fury. It's the instinct to claim what I—" He stopped himself, fists curling against his knees. What?" she pressed, voice tight. "What I want most," he finished, looking at her like the words alone would burn the world down. Her throat went dry. She should have been afraid. But instead, she whispered, "And what if I don't want to be claimed?" He smiled faintly, pained. "Then I will starve before I take what isn't freely given." Chapter 43. The Breaking Dance. The next rehearsal was a battle. Nyla hurled herself into each movement, fighting invisible enemies. Kaelen shadowed her, correcting when she faltered, catching her when she stumbled. "Stop trying to prove yourself to ghosts," he snapped. "And stop trying to own me," she fired back. Their words collided, louder than the music, louder than their footsteps, and then, without warning, her body betrayed her. She landed wrong, ankle twisting, a sharp cry tearing from her throat. Kaelen was there in an instant, his arms steady as stone as he caught her. She tried to push away, but the pain forced her still. "Let me go," she hissed. "I can't," he growled, voice breaking. "Don't ask me to." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she didn't argue. She let herself rest in his arms, trembling from more than pain. Chapter 44. Healing in Shadows. He wrapped her ankle with the gentleness of someone who had stitched wounds in battle. His hands were rough, but his touch was careful, reverent. "You'll be fine," he murmured, "but you have to stop fighting me long enough to heal." Nyla stared at him, lips pressed tight. "You're too much." "So are you," he said. The truth of it silenced her. The studio seemed to shrink, the mirrors closing them in, trapping them with the weight of everything unsaid. Finally, Kaelen brushed a curl from her damp forehead, Not quite touching, but close. One day, he whispered, you'll realize I was never your enemy. Her heart hammered against her ribs. And what if I realize you're more dangerous than any enemy I've ever had? Then, he said softly, eyes glowing, I'll spend my life proving you wrong. Chapter 45, The Edge of Fire. The next night she returned, ankle-wrapped but defiant. Kaelen didn't stop her. He simply stood nearby, steady as the barri, silent as the storm outside. They didn't argue this time. They danced. Not together, not apart. Something in between. A conversation of bodies, a collision of wills, a fire sparked from every step. By the time the music ended, both were trembling, sweat-slick, breathless. Nyla faced him, hair wild, eyes fierce. I don't like you, she whispered. Kaelen's chest rose, fell, his gaze locked on hers. Good. Then hate me forever, as long as it keeps you this close. Her laugh broke, half a sob, half a surrender, and when their reflections met in the mirror, the fire between them finally glowed too bright to deny. Chapter 46, The Fracture and the Flame. The studio was theirs alone again, locked away from the rest of the city. Rain tapped the skylight in uneven rhythms, the kind of night that belonged to wolves. Nyla leaned against the bar, her body sore, her ankles stiff, her spirit unwilling to bow. Kaelen circled her like a storm cloud waiting to break. You're reckless. You're overbearing. You push too far. You hold too tight. Their voices were sparks, flaring brighter with each word. And then, silence. Thick, waiting, inevitable. Kaelen moved first. His hand braced the bar beside her hip, his face close enough that she could feel the heat rolling off him. His voice was low, guttural. Tell me to stop. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She should have said it, but her lips stayed closed, betraying her. Thought so, he whispered, pulling back just enough to leave her aching in the space between. Chapter 47, The Wolf at the Door. The next morning, whispers spread through the company. Kara was furious, donors restless. The gala had sparked talk of Nyla's rise and Kaelen's defiance. You've made me a target, Nyla hissed, cornering him in the office. You've always been a target, he countered. The difference is now, they can't hit you without hitting me too. I didn't ask for your shield. And I didn't ask for your fire, he snapped. But here we are. Their eyes locked, heat colliding with heat. Nyla slammed the door shut behind her, the sound like thunder. You drive me insane. Kaelen's smile was sharp, dangerous. Good. That means you feel it too. Chapter 48, The Tearing Point. That night, she danced until her body refused her commands. She collapsed on the floor, breath hitching, tears she hated pooling in her eyes. Kaelen knelt beside her, hands hovering but not touching. Nyla. Don't. She shook her head, curls damp with sweat. Don't pity me. I don't, he said, voice rough. I've never pitied you. I've envied you. Her head snapped up. Envy? You fight like every step matters, he said. I was born alpha, handed authority. You earned every ounce of yours. That terrifies me, and it makes me want you more than anything I've ever wanted. The words seared through her, too raw, too true. She couldn't answer. She could only breathe, each inhale tangled with his. Chapter 49, The Edge of Surrender. Days blurred, nights stretched long. The slow burn thickened into something undeniable, alive in every argument, every silence, every accidental brush of skin. One evening, she tripped, not from weakness, but from distraction, from watching the way his eyes followed her. Kaelen caught her around the waist, pulling her close. This time, she didn't shove him away. His breath ghosted over her ear. "Say the word, and I'll let go." Her fingers clutched his shirt before she realized what she'd done. She whispered, trembling, "Don't!" And for the first time, the fire between them roared without restraint. Chapter 50. Wolves and Ballerinas. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but it was everything just shy of it. Their foreheads pressed, their breaths tangled, their hearts pounding in tandem. Kaelen's voice was a promise and a warning all at once. "I'll never own you, but I'll fight every day to stand beside you, even when you hate me, especially then." Nyla's eyes stung. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to love him. She wanted to do both and neither. So she whispered the only truth she could manage. "You're the worst mistake I've ever wanted to make." Kaelen smiled, wolf and man in one. "Then let's make it slow." The studio held them, a cage and a sanctuary all at once. And for the first time, Nyla let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, being trapped wasn't the same as being powerless. It was the beginning of something she could no longer run from. Chapter 51. Cinders and Ashes. The studio smelled of sweat and resin, but to Nyla it had become more than a practice hall. It was the battlefield where she and Kaelen clashed night after night. Tonight was no different. She drilled the same sequence until her blistered toes screamed, punishing herself with repetition. Kaelen's voice broke through, low and steady. "You're chasing perfection that doesn't exist." She spun on him, eyes blazing. "And you're chasing control you'll never have." He didn't flinch. He closed the distance instead, the air thickening between them. "Perfection isn't what makes them remember you. Fire does, and you already burn." Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, wanted to shove his words back into his chest, but her reflection in the mirror betrayed her. Flushed, alive, undeniable. Chapter 52. The Bite of Truth. The storm shutters had jammed again, locking them inside for yet another night. The irony wasn't lost on her. Fate seemed to conspire to keep her caged with him. They argued over everything: tempo, breath, even the angle of her arms. "You're insufferable," she spat. "And you're addicted to suffering," he fired back. Her chest rose and fell, her pulse unsteady. "Why do you care if I break myself?" His eyes flared gold in the half-light. "Because every time you bleed, I feel it in my bones." The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was thunder waiting to split the sky. Chapter 53. The Alpha's Scar. Later, when she caught her breath, she noticed the faint line along his jaw, a scar half hidden beneath stubble. "How'd you get that?" she asked, surprising herself. Kaelen's gaze flicked to her, sharp, then softer. "A fight I should have lost. And I didn't. But the scar reminds me what happens when arrogance outweighs instinct." Nyla studied him, her fingers twitching with the urge to trace it, to learn its story in silence. She curled her hands into fists instead. "So even alphas bleed." His smirk was faint, wry. "Especially alphas." Something in her chest shifted. Not sympathy, not pity, something closer to recognition. Chapter 54. The Almost Again. They circled each other as if the studio were too small to hold them both. Every word, every glance, every movement brought them closer to a line neither dared cross. At one point, he caught her waist during a slip, steadying her with effortless strength. Their bodies froze, pressed close, her breath tangled in his. His eyes burned gold, lips a fraction from hers. Nyla's heart stuttered, her body betraying her resolve. For one impossible second, she thought she'd let him close the gap. But she pushed off his chest, breathless. No. Kaelen's voice cracked low, strained with restraint. Then I'll wait, even if it kills me. Her pulse pounded. She hated that part of her wanted him to wait. Chapter 55. The Choice. The gala reviews flooded in. Critics praised Nyla's performance, calling her a flame that refused to be smothered. Yet Caro seethed, rallying allies to push her out. You should leave, Kaelen told her one night, before they break you. Her eyes narrowed. That's what you do? No, he said. That's what I'd never forgive myself for if I let you do. She stepped closer, fury burning hotter than fear. This studio is mine too, whether you signed a deed or not. I'm not leaving. The wolf in his eyes softened. Good. Then we fight together. And for once, Nyla didn't argue. Chapter 56. The Edge of Firelight. The studio had become their kingdom. Her bar, his shadows, the mirrors that never stopped bearing witness to their storms. That night, the air carried the weight of every unspoken word. Nyla stretched, her ankle still tender, her pride sharper than the ache. Kaelen prowled near the window, moonlight cutting across his face. You're restless, he said. You're suffocating, she shot back. Better than abandoning. Better for who? Their eyes clashed, sparks catching dry tinder. And then, silence, the kind that trembled with the threat of flame. Nyla turned to the mirror, forcing her breath steady. But her reflection betrayed her. Heart racing, cheeks flushed. She could see him watching her, even when she didn't look. Chapter 57. Wolves Don't Bow. The next evening, Caro summoned her to the boardroom. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, cold light on colder faces. You're talented, Miss Daniels, Caro purred, but this company requires discipline, humility, knowing one's place. Nyla straightened her shoulders. I know mine. On the stage. Gasps rippled through the room. Caro's smile sharpened, but before she could respond, Kaelen's voice thundered from the doorway. Wolves don't bow. Every head turned. His presence filled the room, commanding without effort. If you want her gone, he said evenly, you'll drag her over my corpse. And I assure you, I don't fall easy. Caro's painted lips twitched. She said nothing. She didn't have to. The battle lines were drawn. Chapter 58. Sparks in the Dark. That night, Nyla stormed into the studio, fury dripping from every step. You've made me untouchable. You're welcome, Kaelen said dryly. No, you don't get it, she shouted. They'll never forgive me now. I'll never be accepted. He stepped closer, eyes molten. Then stop wanting their acceptance. Want more? Her chest rose and fell. More what? More than their crumbs. More than survival. More than proving yourself to ghosts. Want everything. The rawness in his voice stole her breath. She hated him for it. She loved him for it. And she hated herself for wanting both. Chapter 59. The fracture deepens. She danced until her body gave out, collapsing onto the wooden floor. Kaelen crouched beside her, brushing sweat-damp curls from her face. You're too stubborn, he muttered. And you're too much, she whispered. They locked eyes, both trembling, not from weakness, but from the unbearable pull between them. His hand hovered near hers, close enough to touch, far enough to let her choose. For one fleeting moment, Nyla almost reached back. Almost. But she curled her fist instead. Not yet. Kaelen's jaw tightened. Then I'll wait until yet becomes now. The promise settled into the air like smoke, impossible to clear. Chapter 60. The Wolf's Vow. Dawn broke pale across the mirrors, casting them both in fractured gold. Nyla sat at the bar, wrapping new ribbons around her shoes. Kaelen stood nearby, arms crossed, watching like he had sworn an oath he couldn't name. Finally he spoke, voice low and steady. I'll never force you. I'll never cage you. But understand this, wolves don't forget the ones who set them free. Her hand stilled on the ribbons. She looked at him, the alpha, the man, the wolf, and for the first time, she didn't feel trapped. She felt chosen, and that terrified her most of all. Chapter 61. The Fire Beneath. The days after the boardroom standoff blurred together, every rehearsal thick with unspoken tension. Nyla danced harder, sharper, like each movement was a blade cutting through the whispers that trailed her. She bled through satin, through tape, through pride. Kaelen noticed everything. He didn't lecture, not this time. He simply stood close enough that his presence reminded her she wasn't invisible anymore. One night, when she collapsed against the mirror, chest heaving, Kaelen crouched in front of her. "You burn yourself like kindling," he murmured. "Better to burn than fade," she rasped. His golden eyes softened, fierce and tender at once. "Better to blaze and survive." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him to leave her alone. She wanted him closer. She wanted both until she shook with the confusion of it. Chapter 62. Ash and Bone. The studio wasn't just wood and mirrors anymore. It was battlefield, sanctuary, prison, and home all at once. Nyla felt it in her bones. That evening, as thunder rumbled distant, Kaelen worked silently at the bar, tightening bolts with his bare hands. She stretched nearby, the silence pressing on her ribs. Finally, she broke it. "Why do you stay?" He looked up, brow furrowed. "Where else would I go?" "You're an alpha," she said, voice sharper than she meant. "Don't you have a pack to run? Lands to rule? People to bow to you?" His lips curved, humorless. "I don't want bows. I want truth. And the only place I've found it is here." Her chest ached. She turned away before he could see her eyes betray her. Chapter 63. The Spark They Couldn't Kill. Caro doubled her efforts. Rehearsals cut short. Schedules rearranged. Snide remarks disguised as notes. Every dancer felt the chill, but Nyla bore the brunt of it. Still, she danced, and when she faltered, Kaelen's gaze anchored her, steady, unyielding. "You think you're protecting me?" she snapped one night, sweat dripping down her temple. "I know I am," he answered. "It won't work. They'll destroy me anyway." His eyes glowed, wolf bright. "Let them try." The ferocity in his voice stole her words. For once, she didn't argue. She just breathed, letting the silence say what she couldn't. Chapter 64. The Edge of the Mirror. It happened when exhaustion made her sloppy. She slipped mid-pirouette, crashing shoulder first into the mirror. The glass rattled but didn't break. Kaelen was at her side instantly, his hand firm on her back. "You're done for tonight." "No," she hissed, pushing away. "I can't stop." "Yes, you can," he snapped, "and you will." Their stares clashed, hot and furious. But instead of fire, something else cracked open. Rawness, vulnerability, need. Nyla's voice wavered. "If I stop, I'll feel everything I'm trying to outrun." Kaelen's hand hovered near her cheek, trembling with restraint. "Then let me outrun it with you." Her chest ached, her pulse unsteady. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. Chapter 65. The Wolf's Patience. That night, they sat on the studio floor, backs against the mirrored wall, silence stretching between them. Kaelen spoke first. Do you know what patience means to a wolf? Nyla shook her head. It means waiting in the shadows, hungry, aching, until the moment is right. It means knowing that what you want most is worth more than the pain of waiting. Her breath caught. And what is it you're waiting for? His eyes glowed faint. A wolf's fire banked low. You! The words settled into her bones, heavy and terrifying and impossible to ignore. Chapter 66. The Fever of Distance. For the first time in weeks, Nyla didn't return to the studio after rehearsal. She walked past it, ignoring the tug in her chest, daring herself to break free of the hold it, and he, had on her. But the next night, she was back, barefoot, hair unbound, body restless. Kaelen stood waiting in the shadows, as if he had known she would return. You can't keep showing up like this, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. You can't keep pretending you don't want me to, he replied. The words stripped her bare. She turned away, furious at him, furious at herself. You're dangerous. I'm patient, he corrected, stepping closer. And patience is its own kind of danger. Her pulse thundered. She hated that he was right. Chapter 67. The Wolf's Touch. It started as correction. His hand hovered at her spine, guiding her line. Her body stiffened, but she didn't move away. Breathe here, he murmured, his voice brushing over her skin like heat. Don't tell me how to breathe, she whispered back, though her chest obeyed him anyway. His hand slipped away, leaving her colder than she wanted to admit. She spun on him, eyes fierce. Stop trying to control me. I'm not, he said. I'm trying to keep you from breaking. Her voice cracked. And what if I already am? Kaelen's jaw tightened, pain flickering across his face. Then I'll hold the pieces until you're ready to put them back. Chapter 68. The Relentless Burn. Caro's games grew crueler. Roles shuffled, partners reassigned. Every slight meant to chip away at Nyla's resolve. But Nyla refused to bend, and every time she walked back into the studio after hours, Kaelen was there, steady as the bar, unyielding as the mirrors. You never leave, she accused one night. You never ask me to, he answered. The admission hit her harder than any insult Caro could throw, because it was true. She hadn't asked him to leave, and she wasn't sure she ever would. Chapter 69. The Almost Shatter. It happened when her shoe tore mid-turn. She stumbled, collapsing hard onto the floor. Kaelen was at her side before the echo faded, hand steady, voice sharp. You push until you bleed, until you fall, until you hate yourself. Why? Her throat tightened. Because if I stop, I disappear. His hand brushed hers, firm and sure. Not while I see you. Her eyes met his, raw and desperate. The air between them pulsed. For one unbearable moment, she thought he would kiss her. She thought she would let him. But the moment broke, leaving them both trembling in the silence. Chapter 70. The Line Between. Dawn found them still there, her head resting against the mirror, his body tense beside her. Neither had moved, neither had spoken. Finally, Kaelen broke the quiet. I'll wait forever if I have to. Nyla's eyes burned, her voice a whisper. And what if forever never comes? His golden gaze held hers, unwavering. Then I'll still be here. And for the first time, She didn't call him arrogant. She didn't call him alpha. She simply believed him. Chapter 71. The Cost of Fire. Word spread fast. Critics were still writing about Nyla's performance. Donors were whispering about Kaelen's defiance, and Carol's grip on the company was slipping. That only made her more vicious. Roles were reassigned again, and Nyla was placed in the ensemble for a piece she had once led. When she read the casting sheet, her stomach twisted. Her name, pushed to the bottom, was meant to humiliate. That night, in the studio, she tore through choreography until her body screamed. Kaelen stopped her mid-turn, his hand gripping her wrist. "This isn't a rehearsal," he said. "It's a war. And you're letting them wound you before the battle even begins." Her chest heaved, eyes burning. "What am I supposed to do? Smile while they strip everything away?" "No." His voice was steel. "You show them you don't need their crowns. You already wear fire." Chapter 72. The Wolf's Warning. Later, when the storm shutters locked them inside again, Kaelen's eyes burned brighter than the emergency lights flickering overhead. "They'll try to break you," he said. "And when they do, I won't hold back anymore." "Don't threaten them," Nyla snapped. "That'll only prove them right about you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping into something rawer. "It's not a threat. It's a promise. I've watched you bleed on this floor too many times to let them take more." Her pulse raced. "You can't fight all my battles." "No," he said, "but I'll fight beside you. Always." The vow sank into her bones, terrifying and steady all at once. Chapter 73. The Breaking Rehearsal. The next day, during company practice, Caro's favorites accidentally clipped Nyla during a lift. She hit the floor hard, breath stolen from her lungs. Gasps rippled through the room, but Caro only frowned. "Careless, Miss Daniels. Do try to keep up." Kaelen's growl rolled from the back of the hall, low and feral. Every head turned. His golden eyes burned, his wolf just under the surface. "Touch her again," he said, voice sharp as claws, "and you'll regret it." The dancers froze. Caro's smile was brittle, but even she didn't speak. Later, Nyla confronted him in the empty studio. "You can't do that. You'll ruin me." He shook his head. "No, I'll ruin them before I let them ruin you." Chapter 74. The Thread Between. That night, silence pressed heavy. Nyla iced her bruised side while Kaelen stood watch near the window, his back to her. Finally, she whispered, "Why me?" He didn't turn. "Because you're the only one who fights like the floor itself owes you respect. Because you remind me of the part of myself I never thought I'd find again." Her throat tightened. "And what part is that?" "The part that still believes in belonging." She looked at him, silhouetted in moonlight, and for the first time, she didn't feel like the girl mopping floors, clawing for scraps. She felt like someone worth staying for. Chapter 75. The Edge of Surrender. The next rehearsal stretched long into the night. Nyla pushed past exhaustion, Kaelen shadowing her every step. Their reflections danced in the mirrors, a duet neither had admitted to yet. When she collapsed onto the floor, too spent to rise, Kaelen crouched over her, his breath ragged. "Tell me to stop wanting you," he whispered. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She could have said it. She should have said it. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered back, trembling, "Don't!" And for the first time, she let herself want the fire she had spent so long denying. Chapter 76. The Wolf's Patience Wears Thin. The days blurred. Each rehearsal another war fought in mirrors and shadows. Nyla's body ached, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. Kaelen shadowed her every move, watching with eyes that glowed whenever she faltered, steadying her without touching. One night, she threw her shoes aside, collapsing on the floor. "You're driving me insane," she gasped. Kaelen crouched in front of her, golden gaze fierce. "Good, because insanity is the only thing keeping me from taking what I want." Her breath caught. "You said you'd wait." His jaw flexed, restraint trembling. "I am. But wolves aren't saints, Nyla. Patience has teeth." Her pulse raced. She hated how much she wanted those teeth to sink into her world, to shatter the walls she'd built. Chapter 77. The Burn of Truth. The board called another meeting. Caro tried again to cut Nyla from the upcoming showcase. Her allies nodded, murmuring agreement. Kaelen leaned forward, his voice calm but sharp. "If she doesn't dance, the showcase doesn't happen." Gasps echoed. Caro bristled. "You dismantled decades of tradition for one girl?" "One woman," he corrected. His gaze slid toward Nyla, burning. "And yes." Later, in the studio, Nyla rounded on him. "Why would you risk everything for me?" His answer was immediate, raw. "Because without you, this place is just walls and dust. With you, it's alive. And I can't go back to dead." Her chest ached, the truth hitting too deep to deny. Chapter 78. The Fracture Softens. That night, they stayed long after everyone left. Nyla sat on the floor, unwrapping her bloody ribbons. Kaelen knelt beside her, carefully taking the ruined shoe from her hands. "You destroy yourself for them," he murmured. "When will you dance for you?" Her eyes burned. "Maybe I don't know how." "Then let me show you." He set the shoe aside, lifting her hand instead. His touch was light, reverent, almost worshipful. "One day, you'll stop fighting me long enough to see I've never been your enemy." Her breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. Chapter 79. Shadows and Silver. The skylight bled moonlight across the floor, turning the studio into a silver cage. Nyla stretched, her body humming with exhaustion and something sharper. Kaelen stood a few feet away, watching with that same impossible patience. "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked finally. "Like what?" "Like you already know the ending." He stepped closer, golden eyes catching the moonlight. "Because wolves don't wonder about endings. We chase them." Her heart pounded. She wanted to argue, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "Then what happens when you catch me?" Kaelen's voice dropped to a growl. "I hold on until you stop running." Chapter 80. The Almost Again. It was too much, too close, too inevitable. She spun away, launching into a furious string of turns, faster and faster, until the room blurred. Kaelen didn't stop her. He just watched, letting her burn herself raw. When she finally stumbled, breathless, he caught her. His arms wrapped around her waist, strong and unyielding. Their eyes locked, their breaths tangled, and for the third time, the world held its breath. This time, she didn't push him away, but she didn't pull him closer either. Instead, she whispered, trembling, "Not yet." Kaelen's jaw clenched, but his voice was steady. "Then I'll wait, even if it breaks me." And the studio, their cage and sanctuary, kept their secret for another night. Chapter 81. Splinters of Desire. The studio was quiet, but the silence wasn't peace. It was tension stretched taut, ready to snap. Nyla leaned against the mirror, sweat-damp hair sticking to her forehead, while Kaelen prowled the edges of the room like a caged predator. "You watch me like you're waiting for me to fall," she muttered. "I'm waiting for you to stop pretending you don't want to be caught," he replied, voice low and steady. Her chest tightened. She turned away, pressing her palm flat against the mirror. You don't know what I want. Kaelen stepped closer, his reflection merging with hers. Then tell me. The words caught in her throat, trembling on the edge of confession, but she swallowed them down, forcing herself into silence. For now. Chapter 82. A Wolf's Shadow. Caro's whispers poisoned the air. Dancers avoided Nyla. Conversations cut short when she entered the room. It was exile dressed as discipline. That night, when Kaelen found her sitting on the studio floor alone, her knees pulled tight to her chest, he crouched beside her. They're trying to starve you of belonging, he said softly. Her voice cracked. It's working. No, he growled. Not while I'm here. Not while I see you. She lifted her head, meeting the molten fire in his gaze. For the first time, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like a wolf's equal. Chapter 83. The Fragile Thread. Exhaustion bled into her bones. She slipped more often, her body betraying her discipline. One night, as she collapsed mid-sequence, Kaelen caught her before she hit the floor. Enough, he commanded. She pushed at his chest, weak but defiant. I'm not done. You are, he said, voice trembling with restraint. And if you keep pushing, you'll break. Her eyes burned, but the tears didn't fall. Then let me break. Kaelen's hands tightened around her arms, his voice raw. Not in my arms. Never in my arms. The vow left her shaking, her heart pounding against walls she couldn't hold up much longer. Chapter 84. The Wolf's Hunger. The moon was high when the shutters locked them in again. The hum of the city faded, leaving only the two of them, mirrors, and the weight of unspoken truths. Kaelen stood near the skylight, his silhouette carved from shadow and silver. Do you know what hunger is to a wolf? He asked quietly. Nyla shook her head, pulse quickening. It's not food. It's not blood. It's need. To protect. To claim. To stay. His eyes glowed faint gold. You are my hunger, Nyla. Her breath caught, body trembling with the force of his words. And what if I never feed it? His mouth curved, pained but certain. Then I'll starve at your feet before I take without your word. Chapter 85. The Curtain of Dawn. They didn't sleep. Instead, they sat across from each other, the studio floor a battlefield of quiet between them. When dawn seeped through the skylight pale and merciless, Nyla whispered, What if I'm not enough? Kaelen leaned forward, every muscle in his body taut with conviction. You're more than enough. You're the fire I didn't know I was waiting for. Her throat tightened. For once, she didn't argue. She just closed her eyes and let the words sink in, fragile and terrifying. And when she opened them again, the wolf was still there, waiting, patient, unyielding. Chapter 86. The Weight of Silence. The studio breathed with them, the air thick as rosin dust. Nyla stretched at the bar, slower than usual, her movements heavy with thoughts she couldn't shake. Kaelen sat on the floor, back against the mirror, watching her with quiet intensity. Finally, she broke the silence. You don't speak when it matters most. His eyes glowed faintly in the low light. I'm afraid if I do, I won't stop. Her chest ached. She wanted him to stop watching her, to stop haunting every breath she took. She wanted him closer. Both truths ripped her apart. Then don't start, she whispered. But his gaze stayed steady, his silence the loudest confession of all. Chapter 87. Ashes of Pride. Caro announced new casting. Nyla would understudy instead of lead, a calculated insult. The whispers spread fast, claws of gossip scraping her resolve raw. That night, she threw herself into practice until her feet bled. Kaelen intercepted her, blocking the floor. "You'll destroy yourself for a place that was never meant to hold you," he said. Her voice cracked, sharp with fury. "Then where do I belong?" His answer was immediate, unwavering. "With me." The words hit harder than any critique. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to collapse into him. Instead, she walked away, her shoulders trembling with the weight of pride. Chapter 88. The Wolf's Restraint. Later, trapped again by the storm shutters, Kaelen leaned against the door, fists clenched. "You tempt the wolf every time you push past your limits," he muttered. Her laugh was bitter. "You think I'd dance to tempt you?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "I think you dance because you're trying not to feel how much you want me." Her pulse spiked. "You're wrong." "Am I?" His voice was low, dangerous, "because every time I hold back, it feels like I'm bleeding. And every time you don't walk away, I know you feel it too." Her silence betrayed her more than words ever could. Chapter 89. The Fractured Stage. At rehearsal the next day, Caro's chosen swans smirked openly when Nyla stumbled. Laughter hissed behind their hands. Kaelen's growl rumbled from the back of the room, low enough to freeze every dancer in place. His golden eyes locked on the offenders until they shrank back, silent. Nyla stormed into the studio afterward, fury boiling. "Stop interfering!" "I won't," he snapped. "You're making me weak." His hand closed gently around her wrist, steady and warm. "No, I'm reminding you that you're not alone." Her throat tightened, her pride warring with the part of her that longed for those words. Chapter 90. The Edge of Breaking. That night, she didn't argue when he bandaged her feet. She didn't argue when he told her to rest. She didn't argue when he sat beside her in silence, at their shoulders brushing, the heat between them unbearable. Finally, she whispered, "You can't keep waiting forever." Kaelen's gaze burned, molten gold in the dark. Forever is nothing to a wolf who's already found his mate. Her breath caught, her heart slamming against her ribs. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to run, but she stayed. Chapter 91. Doors and Vows. Night thinned to slate. The storm had moved on, leaving the city damp and breathless. Inside the studio, the emergency lights flickered, then steadied, casting Nyla and Kaelen in a wash of tired gold. She sat on the floor, tying new ribbons with careful, stubborn fingers. He watched from the mirror, a sentinel carved of shadow and patience. "Say it," he murmured, voice low enough to hum along the floorboards. "If you want me gone, say it, and I'll walk." Nyla's hands stilled, months of almost pressed behind her ribs. She lifted her gaze. "I don't want you gone." Something in him broke and healed in the same breath. He reached into his pocket and brought out the scrap of satin he'd taken that first night. The blood-touched ribbon, their makeshift glass slipper. He set it in her palm like an oath. "I kept this to remember what I owed you. If you keep it now, it's your choice, not mine." She stared at the ribbon, at him, at the room that had been battlefield and sanctuary and cage. Then, with hands that didn't shake, she looped the ribbon not around her ankle, but around her wrist, knotting it like a promise. "Now," she whispered. The word landed between them like dawn. A thud rattled the front shutters. Another. Metal screamed as a bar was pried. Voices overlapped. Human, ordinary, blessed. "Maintenance. Mr. Wolfe, we got your emergency ticket. Storm jammed the tracks." Kaelen's mouth curved, feral and relieved. He called back, Here! And the studio answered with the thunk of bolts releasing. Nyla rose, and he was already moving, not ahead of her, but beside her. The shutters rolled halfway, caught, then surged up with a final stubborn groan. The door handle turned. Air rushed in. Wet asphalt, sun coming, a city blinking awake. They didn't step through yet. Nyla looked at the life on the other side, then at the mirrors that had held her together when everything tried to pull her apart. This room tried to swallow me. It didn't, Kaelen said. You made it spit you back out. She huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. You meddled. I stayed. He angled toward her, eyes molten. Nyla Daniels, I won't own you. I won't ask you to bow. I will fight beside you until my last breath, build better floors under your feet, and tear down every door that forgets you belong. If you choose me, that's all I'll ever demand. Your choice. Her chin lifted. Then hear mine. She stepped close, paper crown brave, cinders no more. I choose the wolf who waited. I choose the man who listened. I choose the future where we don't ask permission to belong. He exhaled like he'd been holding winter in his lungs. Mate, he said softly, reverently, not as a claim, but as a prayer. Partner, she answered, and the word fit like music. He touched her at last, one palm cupping her cheek, the other covering the ribbon at her wrist. She rose onto aching toes out of habit and defiance, and found his mouth with hers. It wasn't fireworks. It was a steady flame, the kind that stays lit through storms. Applause didn't come. It didn't need to. The maintenance crew cleared their throats and politely looked away. One of them muttered, "About time," and pretended to study a hinge. They stepped into the morning together. Outside, the city made room. Kaelen signed the work order with a quick slash, then turned back to the open door. "Leave the shutters," he told the crew. "Permanently." "Permanent?" the foreman asked. Kaelen glanced at Nyla. "We're done with cages." When the crew left, they stood in the doorway and watched sunlight fall across the floor, bright as blessing. Nyla threaded her fingers through his. "We're not finished." "No," he agreed. "We're beginning." They walked the length of the studio, mapping a new world with each step. At the corkboard by the office, Kaelen pulled down the warped rehearsal schedule and pinned up a blank page. "First order," he said. "Scholarships, open calls, a board that answers to dancers, not donors." "And Caro?" Nyla asked. "Replaced," he said simply, "by people who remember why we dance." She tilted her head. "You already planned this." "I planned a door." "You chose to walk through it." He pressed the paper crown, rescued from a drawer, edges bent, still ridiculous, onto her curls. She laughed, the sound bright and new. "I told you." "I don't bow." "Good," he said. "Queens don't." She unwound the satin from her wrist and tied it to the bari, a small flag at the edge of a kingdom. "For the next girl who thinks bleach and lavender are the only ways in," she said, "let her know a wolf and a ballerina left the door open." He reached for the sound system, static giving way to a simple piano line. No stage, no audience, just morning and a promise. "Dance with me," he said. She did, not to audition, not to prove, but because the floor felt like sky, and the man beside her felt like home. He didn't lead like a savior. He listened like a partner. When she turned, he gave her room. When she leapt, he made sure there was a place to land. They moved until the sun climbed high and the mirrors gleamed, and the world beyond the doorway kept on rushing. Inside, everything was slower, steadier. The burn no longer denial, but warmth. Later, when they finally paused, Kaelen rested his forehead to hers. "Forever," he said, not as a promise made lightly, but as a vow already kept in the waiting. "Forever," she echoed.